Welcome to this episode of the Arter Project, where we discuss all things consciousness, psychedelics, and mental health. Today, we're joined by none other than Dr. Darron Smith. Dr. Smith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. It's a pleasure speaking with you as well. Dr. Darron Smith is a faculty member in the Department of Sociology at the University of Memphis. His areas of research and scholarship examine U.S.-based systems of racial oppression and systemic inequality. Dr. Smith's current research and practice intertwine the study of applied neuroscience, race-based trauma, and mental illness in studying MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. He has worked on the research publication entitled "The Need for Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy in the Black Community and the Burdens of Its Provision." And we're going to discuss all these different things and just kind of unpack Dr. Smith and Dr. Smith's research in this episode. But just to get started, could you tell us a little bit about, your own personal story and, the work you've done?
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak to your audience about these issues. And so I applaud your effort, man, for this. And hope that your audience learns something from it too. Thanks for having me here, man. So I was going to say, great question about that. My journey to this came about through my study looking at race and ethnicity, looking at inequality, looking at oppression, particularly as it pertains to African American. What I noticed in my work in this effort, I noticed the aftermath of trauma that occurred to Black people when people didn't even touch them or lay their hands on them or put anything on them. And what I mean by that is the damaging effects of inhumanity. When people are marginalized, the marginalization is not just a physical space thing, but it's a visceral thing, and that it affects the way that we see ourselves. It affects the way the brain operates. It affects the way the brain is able to communicate and form oscillatory connections with other beings in the universe or in this space as a result of these people being discriminatory, that are marginalizing, dehumanizing, these things, we don't tolerate those very well. And as the pandemic aptly demonstrated, man, the degree to which people are seeking psychiatric care in the aftermath of the pandemic is a case in point of the need for mental health services. Communities hit the hardest, as you can imagine, are African Americans and Latinos, two marginalized and vulnerable communities. And we're seeing an uptick in, again, caseloads of African Americans coming in for psychiatric illnesses. And these illnesses are not necessarily brought about by the traditional stressors that you think about, right? Like job, home, kids, but it's brought about by microaggressions that occur daily, like little nicks and cuts and slights. Thank you. These processes are just over time can lead to builds up and can lead to cuts by death by 1,000 cuts, right? Can lead to long-standing problem. And one of those problems is race-based trauma. Some scholars refer to it as racial battle fatigue or race-based trauma, but what is it? There's another name for it, and the name slips me, but there are other names for this particular constellation of symptom that we see in individuals who are exposed to, long-standing, cuts, 1,000 cuts a day. Your hair, let me touch your hair. Does it rub off? You don't sound like, the rest of them. Or on and on and on, right? These things. And what Black people feel when we work in white spaces.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's this racial trauma that caught my attention in my work. And then as I began to read it and to get more into the nitty gritty, I kept seeing psychedelics come up. I was like, And I started to see other scholarly research looking at the same thing. And Monica, my dear colleague, Monica Williams, who I didn't know then, I read a lot of her work about this, and here I am. So I think it's just my, circuitous way of trying to find meaning in my own work, right? So you get all this stuff and you're doing all this work, but so what? What does it mean in the end? So like you, when you during your particular ketamine session, the times that I've been exposed to these things, there is a sense of enlightenment. There's a sense of purpose, right? It's much deeper than what we call the physical world, right?
And that's kind of what we're all seeking, right? Is purpose. That word
Right.
purpose. You see that in the psychedelic space a lot, and just like in everyday living life, right? It's like, what do you have to wake up for? It goes back to that P word, purpose. You also mentioned Dr. Williams. Do want to shout out Dr. Williams. I love her work. She's really dope and nice in the space. You mentioned that I want to go to that period right there where you got introduced to psychedelics. What could you speak about some of the literature that you read or documentaries or whose work really kind of set your antennas off to the space?
Well, I guess I have to say it again. I mean, her work overwhelmingly caught my attention because she was talking about the same things that I was talking about, but my discipline was more sociology based.
Gotcha.
And so hers coming from the psychology field. So the differences between how we approach these things are not terribly that different. But reading her literature and making sense of this in my own mind was extremely helpful. So Monica Williams, her stuff stands out. Nicole Buchanan, Dr. Nicole Buchanan at MSU, Michigan State University. Nicole's work has been quite helpful too in this regard. Bia Labache, I've read some of Bia Labache's work. Dr. Bia Labache.
Okay.
I think that's B-A-T, what is it? B-A-T-A or something like that. Labache. Forgot how to spell. Sorry, Bia, forgive a brother. Forgive a brother if you see this. But these were some of the main people that I've read. Remember, as you said earlier, the field is evolving, right? So even within the psychological, in this space, there's not a lot of literature. There's more literature forthcoming, but there's not a lot out there.
We're so early.
So very, very early. So that's Monica, was the first one to hop into the space. And so her name is, she's being cited, tons and tons of times because of her work. And at least in her bringing to the forefront a way to talk about this that made sense, that was intelligible for people, to see the value of what this means. And I think this coincided, fortunately, with the death of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
When sort of this racial reckoning that was quickly eroded by what do you call that? Them fools in DC. The Proud Boys and all that.
Oh, yeah.
What they call it? What they call it? The white folks call it. It's a particular theory, replacement theory.
Replacement theory.
Yeah.
They need MDMA. So a lot of your work is in MDMA, Dr. Smith. So could you talk a little bit about how, what MDMA in particular, why does that seem like a promising compound to treat PTSD in comparison, especially to how PTSD has been treated for so many years in the past? What is it about MDMA in particular that seems effective in treating trauma?
That's a great question. So it tends to take the sting out of revisiting traumatic experiences, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
one can visit a traumatic experiences without having to relive it again. They can almost be like have an out of body experience.
Interesting.
They see the experience, but they're not affected by it, right? The autonomic nervous system doesn't respond to it. You're sort of a sojourner looking into your own experience. That's one. That's very important.
Detachment.
The other,
kind of reminds me of like Buddhism and detachment.
Right. People are allowed to go there. When before going there was extremely painful and difficult and re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
So this was a way that was enabled so far participants who've been in trials to be able to have some relief, and to be more circumspect about their traumas, so that the trauma experiences don't overcome them, right? Other ways that, I guess we'll get to that, but this is a really nice way this is where neurotech could be very helpful too. And we'll talk about this. I guess we'll talk about it. No, we won't, because you didn't mention any serious questions. But
we can talk about it. That sounds really interesting. Neurotech.
Well, this is where one of the areas that I'm in is neurotech, or brainwave training, right? Particularly using a technique called neurofeedback. So it involves an EEG machine. An EEG is a gadget, a medical gadget that you put on your head, uses a cap that captures the brain waves, the brain oscillations that occur in your brain.
Yeah.
That occur at milliseconds, just like an EKG measures the electrical activity of your heart.
Okay.
Right, you get the same thing. So with that gibberish that you see on the screen that flows across an EEG screen, it's just gibberish. It's just little lines, and you can take those lines and put it into a high-powered computer, and that computer will digitize those lines and give you a readout of what your brain is looking like at a particular moment in time. With enough frequency, you begin to see this pattern emerge, right? And so these patterns correlate with these cap you put on top of your head. Each one of those cylinders represents an area beneath it that is responsible for some type of behavior in the brain. Now, this sounds like some Star Wars stuff, but this is precisely what neurologists do when they're evaluating someone who had a seizure. They use the same technique, but that's all they do. But wouldn't you know it, you can take those brain waves that are not firing correctly, that have an aberrant oscillatory pattern that's so obvious when you look at it, there's something going on in that region. You can actually train it. So you can take that same information, put it back in the computer. Client or patient is looking at a computer screen. They'll play a game. They can play a game, a digital game. They can watch a movie, which gives them a reward. So every time they do something right, we ask the brain to slow down. And when the brain slows down, they get a reward. They get a dopamine reward. And they say, okay. So the brain learns. It learns to say, okay, to correct the aberrant brainwave pattern so that the patient can get some relief. Suddenly they feel better. They can focus better. They can concentrate better. They're less agitated, right? And you're creating, or at least developing, what's called neuroplasticity. In healthcare and medicine, we've only focused on one domain of the brain, and that's the neurochemical domain of the brain, right? That's where most of big pharma has focused in on, with drugs to treat individuals that have, psychiatric disorders, SSRIs, SRIs, and what have you. This is the billion-dollar, maybe trillion-dollar industry that big pharma has focused on. But what they didn't focus on, or what no one is really focused on, is the electrical domain of the brain, right? The brain communicates through electrical oscillations, right? It takes what we see in the world and converts it into electrical signals that travel to the front part of the brain, the back part of the brain, the side of the brain, all regions of the brain, as the brain tries to make sense of its environment, interacting with the environment, doing two things. Is this safe? Am I going to die? Is this safe? Am I going to die? And in the absence of a pterodactyl chasing us down, right, the way our ancestors would have, right, that enemy we're looking for is shame. To be shamed, to be dehumanized, to be marginalized, to be made to feel that you're less than, right? Humans don't do well with that. We didn't evolve that way. We evolved in cliques, groups, tribes, small bands, right? These multi-million population enclaves that exist in the world is very new to our species. We're not doing very well. We're adapting to the the traffic and the noise and all of the people living on top of each other, we're adapting, but in the end, it's not very good for our mental health because it's still a very lonely, isolating experience. When you think about it, how can it be lonely and isolating and have all these people around?
Yeah,
we didn't evolve that way. We evolved in small groups.
Yeah.
Small cliques.
And that reminds me of the Dr. King quote. He said, we have guided missiles and misguided people. With that, what that makes me just think about is like just our technology goes so much faster than us. And kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying is like, would you say we're not like meant for all this, or at least not yet? And, you know, and we have to make this adjustment, and it's a slow adjustment, and it's kind of rough.
It just hasn't been enough time for us to, as a species, and remember, we're a species. We're one of several hominids that evolved, right? Homo sapien. We're one. So we're going to evolve still, you know. And I think this next evolution might be cyborg. But you know, getting back to this question of the brain, you can, once you understand the oscillatory waves and how the brain communicates, you can use that technology with MDMA, right? MDMA lowers the ego threshold, right? It fosters pro-social behaviors, right? Which is something that's very important for white folks. White folks, I'm gonna tell you real quick, I want to do a session where we get together and we work on the unintentional racist impulses that most white folks operate on, whether they're aware of it or not, right? And under the influence of MDMA, this might enable my white brethren to be able to, and sister, to be able to foster more empathy. One of the reasons why I like MDMA is its ability to do that, to foster empathy, to take people who are otherwise are slow to develop it, such as white Americans, when it comes to things like racism and so on, make them more likely, make them more pliable to, and more willing to understand the fact that we all share the same universe. We all are made, what humans have in common in our universe beyond anything that you can imagine or think of is carbon. The most abundant element in the universe, and we're all made up of carbon, right? We eat it, it's in our cells, it's all over the place, right? So, and I'm saying that only to say that the superficial differences that we see in each other, right, which amount to less than 1%, is a hill of beans when it comes to the universe, right? And the way that we interpret these differences, right, have caused so much damage and so much harm to peoples, and we don't have to do that. There's a better pathway. Our current route is just unsustainable the way we're going at it now. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I saw. That's kind of where I am when it comes to this.
Yeah, and it's a lot, and it's so promising. Like to just the issues that you mentioned earlier is just. This seems like one of the first things that seems like very, very promising in being able to make a dent between like the divides that we have in America, like you said, instilling empathy in others. And also, the current established system that we have in big pharma. There's also an issue with therapists and having people of color as therapists and having Black therapists or guides. Can you talk a little bit about, and I know you mentioned this a little bit in your paper, just about the importance of having a Black therapist in a psychedelic session or therapy session?
So, another outstanding question, my brother. So, I think it speaks to the heart of what's called health equity, right? And the notion of health equity. We see this is also in the talk therapy world. Health equity being, research has suggested that when providers sees a patient that looks like them, right, the outcomes are much better than when they have a provider that doesn't look like them, right? The same research has been replicated in schools, right? Public schools where 88% or more of school teachers are white women, right? and the particular educational outcomes for Black students, right, are just not on par with what they are with white students, right? And that has something to do with this mind block that white folks have in general when it comes to diversity and race. And I say that to suggest that this idea of empathy, the fostering of empathy that all humans have, except for humans who've been put at the top of this arbitrary racial hierarchy and have been made to believe that that hierarchy is actual physically and materially real in the lives of ordinary people, and that we are taught to believe is true. Even Black people falls for that. I think one of the greatest examples of that is Clarence Thomas.
Oh man,
the Supreme Court Justice, who is just absolutely outrageous. I'm not sure how political we get in this particular podcast, but I like to be quite real about these things. Speak the truth about these things. So the fostering of, and my work is on race, and my work is trying to understand racism as it pertains to Black folks, the injury it's done to Black people, right? And also the injury it's done to white people, but differently. The injury for white folks is different than the injury it is for Black folks. They're both injured, but in different ways, right? And what it means, they're both all being victims of racism or white supremacy. So that's kind of what I'm hoping that we can do. And so we can't, I want to circle back real quick. I want to make sure I cover this issue too, because you had mentioned this is important about providers of color, therapists of color, right? And why it's important. Without therapists of color, we can't really get a sense of the experiences that other people of color are having, or to be able to sort of interpret it, other people's experiences. That's not to say that Black people have this monolith, right? There's differences between Black people, right? We know I want to underscore this point, my brother. So what it means to be Black in California or LA doesn't mean the same thing as what it means to be Black in Memphis, right? They're two entirely different experiences. But what Black people share in common is oppression. That's what we share in common. We're oppressed, right, by the same structures that have been oppressing us for centuries. So it's important then to have people of color in the room and to have them at the table, right? And to have them as equal partners in participating in this endeavor, particularly when we're talking about spiriting people through a mystical experience or a mystical journey on their road to recovery, right?
What is
folks
that?
Of color.
What is that, Dr. Darron Smith? What is, for listeners who may not be familiar with that, what is the mystical experience? Because you hear that a lot in the psychedelic space, but could you explain what that is?
Sure. So it's just, think of it as a form of disassociation, right? Where you feel the sensation of leaving your body. And in this process of leaving your body, you're able to see things that perhaps you weren't able to see. They become clear in your mind, or they become mystified in your mind, right? Unorganized yet organized, right? Unfettered yet fettered, right? And within this mess, this chaos that exists within these spaces, as one is transitioning from the physical space into the material space as they disassociate their bodies, therein lies that mystical experience, that space where you feel like you can actually feel yourself being out of body, but then you're able to see other things that you weren't able to see. What I like to think of that is, in order to make sense of it, is what Freud called the ego. So from the point of origin to the point of distance, right? That ego is starting to dissolve, so that people can let down their guards. Why they got those guards up? Because they don't want to be shamed. That's what we said earlier. They don't want to be shamed, so they put up the guards, right? So we're walking around anxious, we're walking around vigilant, right? Waiting for the next person to hurt our feelings or call us out our name and make us feel less than human.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we're not being chased by big cats anymore, but we've evolved, right? Big cats being we're looking over our shoulder, we're gonna get eaten by a big lion back in the Serengeti plains.
Yeah,
We're no
yeah.
longer being chased by lions. We're being
Yeah.
chased by each other, and we're
Mm.
being chased by our minds.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's
Yeah.
true. Wow. So, all right. So I want to go back to, I guess, just the MDMA in particular, right? So, especially for our community, right? Like, what we often hear a lot, like these drugs, like psychedelics, like whether it be psilocybin or LSD, Molly, like they're called like white people drugs. Like they're not typically drugs that people of color, use recreationally, and that could be for a number of reasons. That could be for, fear of incarceration because of us being disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, or just, the overall fear of, quote unquote, losing your mind or going crazy from these drugs. How do we get over that stigmatization in our community? Well, two-part question. Number one, like, do you hear that often from like other Black people you talk to about the work you're doing? And also, how do we help get over that
They
stigmatization?
have no idea. They
Yeah.
call me an oddball brother and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all good. It's all good. I take that as a sign of endearment.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Black people have every right to be suspicious and concerned about these substances, right? After all, yet again, Black people were unwittingly used as scientific experiments early on, in trying to understand many of these substances, LSD in particular.
MK
Some of the studies
Ultra.
that were done. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Where they
yeah.
were giving these brothers like 8 times the dose they were giving white folks.
Yeah.
Just crazy,
America.
craziness. Yeah, man. So, yeah, so I think that long history of being used as guinea pigs in the service of white folks has really been institutionally ingrained in, I think, Black folks' mind. This distrust of the healthcare system, right? Because of the history of being abused. I'm talking about way back in slavery days. I'm not talking about just what with the Tuskegee experiment, or other dastardly things that the government have done in the name of science, where they've completely broken protocol when it comes to even when we're talking about these MDMA or MK Ultra. The experiments that the CIA done was conducting to see if they could get people to tell the truth. Like some old Wonder Woman shit, right? The lasso, throw it around them.
Yeah.
That's what they was trying to do.
Yeah.
With this. It's craziness, man.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get anybody sane to do it. So they said, you know what? Let's find the most vulnerable people who can't fight back. So they go to find people who were, back then they had insane asylums or state hospitals, right? Where they put folks in. And these people didn't have any voice. They had no family members to that would be able to curtail them being used as guinea pigs. So they were completely vulnerable to the system, and they were used as guinea pigs in the service of trying to find whether or not these medicines, these compounds had any kind of efficacy. It was only later then that they were used in experiments to see what kind of benefits they were getting. They were using single therapy, talk therapy, and they were discovering then that they had some benefit, some medicinal benefits for people. In that separation process we talked about, and the point of separation can be very scary, right? When people are going through this, whoa, sounds like riding a roller coaster. Whoa, my God. You see the top of the hill, you're like, oh my God, boom.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. You gotta dive in. And when the trouble, people get into trouble when they see that. They go, oh, they start trying to backtrack.
Yeah.
All that anxiety builds up and so on. So it's better to see that thing, boom, drop in there. Yeah. So, but I think for Black Americans, we have to do a better job of educating Black folks about these substances. Black people generally see, and it goes back to the idea of how Black Americans perceive mental health, right? And in Black communities in general, mental health is seen as sacrosanct, right? It's seen as, boy, Ain't nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You better go ahead and get yourself a blah, blah, blah. So this downplaying of mental illness or outright ostracism, right? The worst thing you can do to a human being is to banish them from the tribe, right? Kick them out. We don't want you no more, right? Banishment, that's the worst. Think about it. And we're ingrained to feel the discomfort of being abandoned, right? We feel that, and that's something that's I think rooted in our genes. What happened in the Serengeti Plains when you're walking around with your tribe, right? And you were banished from your tribe. Well, you're gonna die. You're gonna get eaten by a cat or something.
Yeah.
So to be banished was completely alone. That's when people talk about, this idea of individualism. I'm an individual unto myself. Man, that's just genetically and evolutionary impossible. We didn't evolve that way. We didn't evolve to be single, solitary. We didn't evolve that way. We evolved to be in groups with people, and not counting for the fact that what the ego has done with the formations of the ego and what that's done to sort of suppress some of these urges that we have, these much more, I call them instinctual urges that we have. So we need to do a better job of educating Black people and demystifying, right, what has been, completely perverted because of its association with crime or its association with the criminal justice system, right? So just completely avoid it. Not to mention the name sounds kind of funny, psychedelic. That just sounds just
something you don't trust.
Right, something you don't trust. Right, like psycho, psycho, man. So African Americans struggle with mental health disease, and so do Latinos. Right, this idea of you got something wrong with you, let's just pray it away. Let's just pray that stuff away right now. You can't pray it away, right? And Latinos believe that you got a spirit in you that's causing it. So completely uneducated about mental health, because you look fine. You to your people, your relatives, your friend, you look normal. But what's happening under the hood isn't normal. Oscillations, the brain wave oscillations aren't firing correctly. There's not coherent communication between different regions of the brain, which affect then how you communicate. The brain isn't functioning, so the mind doesn't function. And the mind is consciousness, awareness, being awake, alert, relaxed, and focused. These are off, right? If it's severe enough, you start to have issues with movement, with memory, with irritability, being more irritable, affecting one's sleep. So it's not just a chemical imbalance. It's a dysregulation of brainwave frequencies. So my study is to look, circling back, is to look at how this works together, how these processes can work together synergistically to maybe, if neuroplasticity is not developed because of giving someone pills, neuroplasticity is developed through the formation of new neural pathways that are developed because of learning, because the brain is learning a new activity, right? That's how you facilitate neuroplasticity, by learning a new activity. As you get older, learn a new language. As you get older, play Scrabble, right? To force the brain to learn a new instrument, right? Read a book, read lots of books, right? These are the things that the brain, or brain train during neurofeedback therapy, right? You can do that and also develop neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is developed in the electrical domain of the brain, not the neurochemical domain of the brain.
Got you. Man, Dr. Smith, it was just so much. This has been a great interview. There's just so much you've covered, and which you mentioned not too long ago. You mentioned about just the demystification of psychedelics for our people to help get over the stigma. And for that, I really just want to just commend you and just really just say your work is just so freaking important. it's incredible, the work that you're doing. I think in the grand scheme of things, like over the course of the next 10 years, like, you know, the pioneers in this research and in studying these compounds and how they can improve the conditions for our people, you guys are, enough can't be said for the work that you guys are putting in, and how important it is and how dope it is, man. Because we got to get over the stigma, the promise that, you know, psychedelics can bring to treating these issues that we live with on a day-to-day basis. And it's incredible, man. So Dr. Smith, I just had one last question before we wrap up. And it's just about the future of psychedelic research. What do you see ultimately happening? Like I said, 5 to 10 years from now, do you see like psychedelics being legalized? And, you know, is it similar to how someone would get SSR? Would somebody be able to go to CVS and, you know, get MDMA? Or like, how do you see the future of psychedelics, and how soon as well? Like, how soon do you see these compounds being legalized and being accessible to those that really need it?
Well, the only legal one we have now is ketamine, as the audience might know. There's two others that are in the pipeline. There's MDMA and there's psilocybin. So the FDA is meeting in October to decide on the fate of whether or not MDMA can be used and in what way it can be used. Remember, it was studied using both the compound and talk therapy together, right? So is it going to be something where it's prescribed with these conditions with it? You know, we don't know yet how that's going to go down. My hope is that will it be prescribed? Probably. It's going to be probably have to have a prescription.
And do you think will we be priced out of it also? Like, what is it?
Well, that's the thing. It'll be used off label. It'll be an off label use.
Okay.
And so that means it'll be really, really inexpensive, like ketamine. Ketamine is very cheap. Doesn't cost much to make ketamine.
Yeah.
So it'll be very, very inexpensive to be able to get it. Insurances probably won't pay for it yet. Maybe they will. People are working on that, but they can't until it becomes legalized. So within 5 years, I see it legal in 5 years. I see it decriminalized in 5 years. I see a lot of people trying to monetize off of it. And what I'm going to see, I see a lot of clinics, specific clinics that do psychedelic clinics popping up all over the place, right? And I see the same model that is currently happening in Oregon. Oregon just legalized mushrooms. They're Prop 201, if I'm not mistaken. You can double check that for me. But and what that does is it enables anybody in Oregon who wants to work with mushroom to take a training, get a training class. I think it's 6 months. They learn some basic things that they have to go through. Then they can take that certificate to the state, get a license, right? Then they can go to a mushroom distribution facility, someplace that will be designated throughout the region, get there, whatever they get, and go and do their little ceremonies with people. And that's supposed to roll out here pretty soon. So I think it'll be something like that. I know that MAPS, who is leading the way in this, anybody know who MAPS is? You heard of MAPS before, right?
Yep. Rick Doblin, led by Rick Doblin.
Yeah. Have you ever had Rick on this show before?
I haven't.
You should have him on the show.
Yeah, I'd love to.
He probably would do it.
Yeah.
Probably would do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and dude, I have to commend them. I think, I think MAPS they've had some hiccups along the way, in their studies. They white folks, y'all. I mean, what you expect, man? They gonna have it. They don't know what the hell's going on. But what we need to do is recognize that others do know what's going on, and they need to sort of either step to the side or at least work in tandem with folks who know what's going on when it comes to this space. And to their credit, they have been. They've been making some significant changes in the way that they do business. I know they've done some great things with their MAPS, with their psilocybin, with their assisted therapy training program that they have, which I actually went through their training program, which was great.
Oh, wow.
So I learned quite a bit. And so I actually spoke to Rick Doblin at length about some of this, and his commitment to this is, I think he's committed. He's a committed brother. I think he wants to see equity and inclusion. I know that he's had some, like I said, some of the hiccups. I had some. I mean, and I know Monica and them grilled him. They took it to him, and you know he's made some improvements.
That's dope.
Yeah,
that's dope.
Yes, sir. So Black folks, let me tell you, don't sleep on this.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on this. This is significantly powerful. This brother who's hosting the show, my man here hosting the show, he starts off by saying, at least we have a conversation about his experiences, you know, how transformative it was for him.
100%.
And it was for me. I ain't saying I didn't do nothing. I'm just saying that, you know, just by association is transformative. It's been transformative. But 100%. And this is one of many that I've had the pleasure of meeting, and because this is a teeny tiny space. So I need all my Black brothers and sisters to get involved in this. Brother, have you ever heard of Burning Man?
Burning, yes, the festival.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Burning Man?
No, I haven't, but I've seen like YouTube videos, and I know it's like a psychedelic, you know, hotspot. A lot of people go.
Want to go there.
Yeah.
I think last time I met someone somewhere. I can't remember where I met this sister at, but she had a whole picture of Black folks at Burning Man.
Oh, that's cool.
I could not believe that. A whole group of Black people at Burning Man.
Yeah.
So it's happening.
Yeah.
So anyway, we need to get more of us in this space, folks. It's you know, especially, you know, if you're suffering from these disorders and you just have not found relief, you know, there might be some alternative solutions to it. Ketamine being one, and hopefully in the coming years, others will be available.
100%. 100%. It's happening. The revolution is happening. It won't be televised. It'll be medically supervised. There we go. That's a bar.
Yes. Right.
Dr. Smith, again, I appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me on these topics. These very important subject matter. Before we wrap up, if anyone wants to like read some more of your work or get in touch with you, how could they do so?
You know, you can find my stuff on the internet. Just type in my name in, Darron Smith with an O, 2 R's and an O, and see what comes up. And so you can reach me at my email is Darron Smith, my first and my last name, at mac.com. Just shoot me an email, say hello, see if I can help you any way. Please don't send me any hate mail, Zoom bombs, anything. Dude, I got Zoom bombs, man.
Oh, wow.
Man, it was crazy. I was doing a workshop talking about how white people can use these substances to unlearn their racism. And some fool was, you know, hassling us and stuff like that. And eventually he left. But then everybody's screen popped up with some brothers doing some, you know, some sexual acts.
Oh, man.
And I heard of Zoom bombing, but it's interesting to experience it. So, yeah, no haters.
No haters. There we go.
Away. Stay away. Stay away.
There we go. All right. Well, once again, Dr. Smith, I appreciate you joining for this episode. And all right, for the listeners, hope you guys took a lot away from Dr. Smith's story and his research and the items discussed today. Appreciate everyone for listening. And this is the Arter Project signing out. Peace.